Hi, and welcome to episode 20 of the Mouthwash Talk Show. And we have yet another special guest this evening. And we don't even really, we're going to talk about a lot of different things here, but this is a good guy, Greg Meriweather. He is going to be our guest tonight. And we're going to talk about race and all these other different things. I just want to tell everybody they're doing a good job with the civil discussion. I really do find that we are making some headway with listening to others, respecting their opinion, and showing respect. So keep up the good work, and hey, spread the news about our show, because I think we're one of the only few shows around that actually have civil discussions between all walks of life. So I'm going to go ahead and bring on our first guest tonight, or actually it's our only guest tonight. It's Greg Meriweather. And how are you doing tonight, sir?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm, just living the dream, just try to get a show going and keep everybody in line. And it's fun times, but I'm excited about this show this evening. Because I think it's fairly timely that we have a lot of different situations going on with race, this, race, that, you're this, identity, labels, all these things. And I think it's just a good time to have a discussion about that. So Greg, why don't you tell our viewers, I know that you were on the Do Something Indie show with me last year. So I'm going to put that link up so people can see that interview we did, because I was looking at it again. I'm like, we were sort of prophetic on a lot of things on that show that I think folks would find very interesting about our viewpoints on. But hey, this is a different day. So go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and some background.
Greg Meriweather, born and raised in the city of Indianapolis, IPS student. Marion College grad, but just a guy who is pretty involved, who wants to remain involved in the community, loves the community a lot. I've done a lot of things in Indianapolis, from activism to being, I used to host my own radio show. And then I was the host of the Black Expo television show. I was the community liaison for the city in IMPD, and just a guy who just wants to see the best for people. Not just, I am particular in some ways because I am a Black man, but at the same time, I just want everybody to get their share of the pie and, and be able to live the American dream, regardless of race, color, creed, or anything. So that's who I am in a nutshell.
Yeah, and I know that you're not afraid to tell it like it is, and I do appreciate that about you. I don't know if we agree on every single thing, but we do agree on a lot of things. You've been around in Indianapolis, and one of the things I just want to touch on briefly was, you were a liaison with the IMPD, and you were speaking your mind, and you basically got a little bit of a censure for that, and tell our viewers, just give them a little cliff notes on how that went.
It's unfortunate. Before I ever took a job per se with the IMPD, I was a consultant for a paid consultant for IMPD, and I was an activist, and so it was different because a lot of people listen to what I say. Some agree, some disagree. But when I went in the inside, the unfortunate part about it, when I took a job, I believe it was more so to censor me than it was to listen to me, and have that ability to have a person who has a voice that people hear, and basically remove that voice by basically giving them a paycheck. I didn't have many issues with Chief Roach. My issues came by way of the new chief. Chief Roach was, I think that's why you saw the African-American community, African-American or Black community, embrace Chief Roach so much. So because he took advice. He would listen. Taylor is a totally different guy. And I think you see the difference between Roach and Taylor. I'm not going to say that Roach had the greatest track record as it relates to homicides, but I will say this: he wasn't quiet. And I think what you're seeing now is a chief of police who is quite quiet, and he really wanted to censor me when I was there. But you can tell that that's just who he is, because he censored himself, obviously.
And I think since that's happened, and like I said, I have the running across the ticker there is that show we did together, and we talked about that. That was, and like I said, that was over a year and a half ago, and a lot of stuff just has not changed. So Greg, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to do the Peeps on the Streets. I think you're going to find this interesting. I think I sent you a preview, which is rare because I usually wait till the day of, but we're going to do the Peeps on the Streets, and there's 3 questions that I asked, and I see you smiling already. So I think you're going to approve of this, and we're going to do that. And then when we come back, hopefully you'll be the guy in the big picture, and we'll be all on the side here. But I'm the engineer, so who knows what we'll have? But I'll get it straightened out. So let's go to those Peeps on the Street, and then we'll have our panel come back, and I know they have some good questions for you. Hi, this is John Schmitz for Peeps on the Streets, and I'm out here at Riverside Park here in Indianapolis. And let's go ahead and see what the people have to say out here today. Do you think black people are treated fairly?
No.
No. All right. Do you think? Do you? Hey, I'm answering the questions here. You have to tune into our show to hear the discussion part. So that's a little teaser.
Okay.
But how about, do you think politicians divide us with race?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Final question. Do you think race relations are getting better, worse, or about the same?
About the same.
About the same.
I would say about the same.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Do you think black people are treated fairly?
No.
All right. Do you think politicians use race to divide us?
Yeah.
All right. Last question. Do you think that race relations are getting better, worse, or about the same?
Worse.
Do you think black people are treated fairly?
No.
All right. Do you think politicians use race to divide us?
Yes.
Final question. Do you think race relations are getting better, worse, or about the same?
Worse.
Do you think black people are treated fairly?
No.
Do you think politicians use race to divide us?
Yes. A lot of times they don't realize it, but they do.
But they do. Do you think race relations are getting better, worse, or about the same?
I think it's about the same. However, it seems like it's getting worse, but really it's just things are getting more exposed. But really staying about the same. However, there's a lot of efforts that are taking place right now to get things better. So I guess to really answer your question, it's getting better, but slowly. But we're moving towards the right direction. But not where we should be.
Very good. Thank you. Now, you think black people are treated fairly?
No, I don't.
Okay. Do you think that politicians use race to divide us?
I do, yes.
All right, final question. Do you think that race relations are getting better, worse, or about the same?
I think things are improving, but there's definitely opportunities to do some more improvements. So we've come a long way, but we still have a long way to go.
Do you think black people are treated fairly?
I think it's obvious, probably not in this country. History shows.
All right, do you think politicians divide us by using race?
Well, some try to unite us, but some also try to provide equity for everybody, and sometimes that's also highlighting the inequities of society. And hopefully they uplift everybody.
All right, final question. Do you think race relations are getting better, worse, or about the same?
Well, it is, it's all the above. Some places are getting better in some senses. There's more understanding, empathy shown. Some places are getting worse because some people take offense when one side is probably talking about their grievances. And then it's staying the same in some places because some people are not being educated. So they're remaining ignorant. So I hope that answers the question.
Do you think black people are treated fairly?
No. Not.
Do you think politicians use race to divide us?
Yes.
Do you think race relations are getting better, worse, or about the same?
I would say a little better, depending.
Well, that'll do it for Peeps on the Streets out here at Riverside Park, Indianapolis, at the Juneteenth celebration. And I'll tell you what, I got these interviews done in record time and such nice people willing to talk. So let's see what our panel has to say about that now. All right. Yeah, I almost got it right, Greg. Almost. One of these days I'll be a decent engineer, producer, and host. So that was pretty interesting. Doing the Peeps on the Streets there. And I look forward to it because I was actually at that same Riverside Park 2 years ago getting signatures to get on the ballot for mayor, and I killed it out there. In fact, I asked Joe Hogsett when he was there for the 8th time to sign my petition. Of course, he didn't. but it was still fun, and it's just a good time. So we're going to get started here, and Ed, you're going to be on the hot seat because I can tell you already have a question for Greg. So what we're going to do now, Greg, is they're going to ask you some questions, and you're going to give the answers. So let's go. Go ahead, Ed. Give them that first question. Oh, we don't have any sound from Ed. Ed, we don't have any sound.
And he doesn't speak sign language either, does he?
All right, Ed, get your signs, get your language, get your microphone straightened out. We're going to go to Lucy. Is it?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Go ahead, Lucy. You can ask a question. So
fantastic, Greg. It is nice to meet you. I read so many things about you, and they all seem to center around some comments that you made, which were very courageous to call people out. So I'll start with a small anecdote, and I promise you it has a point. So I'm turning 50 this year, and about 30 years ago, when my husband and I were first married, we went to a church that was active in the idea of, the end of the world is coming and we all have to be prepared. What was interesting about that church is there was kind of like a militia spinoff. And we had a gentleman come speak to us named J.J. Johnson. Now, J.J. Johnson happened to be a Black man from Ohio. He also went on the Phil Donahue show, and they brought him on as a militia person, not knowing he was Black. That's a really funny episode if you can find it, because it killed their whole racist theme that they were going for. But what I remember most about J.J. Johnson was him expressing to all of these predominantly white, we had a few people of color, but I don't think any Black people in that group. And all these people thought that they were just going to take on the United States government, the biggest superpower ever, with the most heavily armed, with the most advanced fighting tactics. And he challenged all of us. He said, you need to go create alliances and friendships with people in the hood. You need to go to the, to the roughest neighborhoods in Indianapolis, and you need to create friendships because these people will be your allies. And it was funny because you saw a few people recoil, not in horror, but in fear. And detecting that, JJ said, really? You're scared to go into Black neighborhoods and the ghetto, and you're going to take on the biggest superpower in the history of the world? I think you guys need to rethink some things. So you've been on the mean streets. And my question for you, as an insulated white person that just moved from Fishers, what's your best advice for creating alliances and really, truly creating partnerships and helping each other?
Oh, wow. You know what? My best advice for becoming allies or creating partnerships, one is to listen. I think a lot of things, I was in a building, I was in a high rise in the city of Chicago, and I was there on business. And I have a lot of family on the west side of Chicago. And if anybody knows Chicago, they know the west side is really, really tough, really, really challenged with a lot of opportunities. And it was interesting that the thought that came to my head was where I was close to Lakeshore Drive. As I looked west, I was like, everything looks okay. And I was looking from on high. And so when I was looking from a level that doesn't get down in the trenches and doesn't get to hear anything other than what the news says, I have no idea, because I'm just looking at it from a totally different perspective. And I think the thing about the streets is that, I believe that the streets are honest. I think that when you see people selling drugs, I see signs and people shunning so much stuff that goes on in the community, but they don't truly know the story of what's happening. And then I don't think they believe the systemic things that take place to cause those things. And so for me, I think the greatest part would be to listen. And I think that once people start listening to what's happening in the communities, I think that then at that point, and if they listen with intention, if they listen and they say, you know what, I really want to help, I think that they would find that there would be more people that would open up and could possibly become allies if people, listen with intention and actually brought themselves to a place of really believing what the people say. And I think that that's not just a missing component from, black people and white people, but also a missing component from even the people that Black people vote for.
Interesting. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, and now John
You're
doesn't have
welcome.
any.
Thank you.
John doesn't have any.
Well, I
There you
muted
go.
my microphone because I didn't want to make any background noise. But you're right on target there. And one of the things as a white person, we joke about, oh, I'm not racist. I have a black friend, or this or that. But listening is very important. And it's really not. I mean, as a white person, I don't understand. I'd like to understand, but I don't understand. So I think part of the battle is trying to look through someone else's lens. So Tiffany, go ahead and unmute, and you're our only black person on our panel, so I'm all ears.
So Greg, it's really nice to have this chance to chat with you. And just a funny, I consider myself brown because of the way people throw it around. Some people talk about skin color and they talk about culture, and they just throw around the term black, and you don't know if they're talking about the culture or skin color or what. But that's just how I refer to myself. So I'm a brown person. Greg, you're brown too. And I really respect, I was looking through your Facebook page, and I really respect some of the posts that you make, the voice that you have, amplifying the voice of folks that are often not heard in our community. And I have a bunch of questions for you. The first one, when you were chatting with us, when we were just starting the show, you talked about, slice of the pie and the American dream. And one of the things I think is interesting is that when we talk about the communities of color, there's demographics. Our community is not a monolith. There's all kinds of folks in the community. When you think about folks who are disenfranchised within communities of color, what type of American dream do you believe is available to them?
Wow. I think, those, I think for the individuals who are disenfranchised, or I think that it's more of an American nightmare. I think the dream is totally different. I think that somehow, some way, something keeps them believing that it's out there. I think there's a tremendously bad narrative that's given to people who are in challenged communities, because generally what happens is you watch TV and you believe that so many people believe they can be Jay-Z. They believe they can sell drugs and come from the Marcy Projects and make it, and all of a sudden transition their lives into becoming billionaires, which is the biggest farce ever. Or they look at shows like Power and believe that you can be James St. Patrick and do the same thing. Or the other part is athletics or entertainment. Most people believe that the only way to achieve it is by being someone who entertains. I think we do a very poor job. I think community-wide, we do a very poor job of presenting anyone, or we don't do a good job of presenting people from different backgrounds who have been successful in different ways. So I think it causes our community to operate in a funnel of saying that we have to go through the funnel of entertainment to ever achieve anything of substantial greatness. I think the other thing is this: when you think about just the return on investment, I'm a black male with a college degree, but being that I am vocal about the injustices or even the things that get done from a political perspective, I'm not liked. So therefore, I'm like, what are you telling my son or my nephews about being a person who does what you say you're supposed to do as it relates to politicians or any elected official, by holding them accountable? So you find that even being an upstanding citizen gets a bad view when you make the decision of standing up and being someone who says this isn't right. And so I think that the American dream is I think the snooze bar is getting hit a lot for people for black and brown people, because I mean, I would, if I were the majority of the people that live in my world, I wouldn't even want to get out of bed. I just be honest about that. Because from what I see, from my perspective, as being someone who has done what America says I should do, I find that it is far more difficult than one could ever imagine.
Yeah, and I would say to go on top of that is, if you on the Peeps on the Streets, when I asked, do you think black people are treated fairly? And we do these poll questions on the People Over Politics, and it's predominantly white. And their question was, well, tell me what fair is. What is fairness? What is that? Define that. And you didn't hear one person on Peeps on the Street. They in their mind, they knew what fairness was. They didn't have to have it explained to them. So you overall have a beat down. I can't make it, instead of what maybe they tell somebody like myself that grew up in the south side suburbs here of Indy. Oh, you can do anything you want if you put your mind to it. Is that, I don't really hear that. What you're saying is that sort of factual?
I don't think that's factual in the black community. I think that even from there's always an underlying message or something that we don't know is happening. It's crazy when you say that. You can be anything that you want to be, but I think that there's a missing line, there's a missing clause. And it says, as long as I feel safe, or as long as you don't step on my toes, as long as I don't feel like you're trying to be equal, then yes, you can be anything you want to. But other than that, I think you can accomplish a lot of things, and you can become make money. Does that mean you're going to be highly successful? You could be a politician, but does that mean you're going to be respected? Because I think I am who I am, but do I think it's fair to be treated the way that I'm treated because of who I am? And the answer to that is no.
Yeah, that was a good one. So Ed, let's see if your mic's working. Let's see what we have here. You're muted.
Man, I'm struggling tonight.
All right, he's here. Ed, meet Greg.
Yes,
Greg,
he is.
Ed. He actually has a voice.
How you doing, Greg? Hey, I'm up here in South Bend, and I'm originally from California. I've seen a lot of this take place. I grew up in the neighborhood back in the 90s when, gang violence was going on. It's something that a lot of millennials point to, the crime bill. And I say, I remember the crime bill. I was at the age, the demographic that was pointed at. I had cousins, friends, family that I knew were in that demographic. It wasn't just white people pushing that through. And as I'm working with different communities, I've been to church groups in the black community here in South Bend. I've also been with Black Lives Matter. I think with demographics, what I see, and I've seen on some of your comments, I also see a shift. It's not a big monolith. There is that division. I have an older, like if I go to a church group, I'm more likely to hear people say, bring in more cops. If I go into a younger group, I'm willing to say, hey, we're not getting treated fairly. And there's often a huge disconnect there between those two groups. And so I'm wondering, like, as a politician, I know politicians need to get out and branch out more into both of these groups. But I often see the politicians reaching out to the older groups and completely missing the kids because they know that's where the voters are. And so could you just kind of, touch on that, or, am I off there, or?
I think that a lot of politicians nowadays are failing tremendously for the simple fact that they're, let me just say this from my perspective. The way politics to me causes separation is because one group of politicians continue to be able to vote their constituency. Because if they have a white community and they're a white politician and it's upholding what they normally uphold, then they get to do it. Black politicians totally forget about the black community. They vote the party. And when you look at it, you say, all right, we're going to, and I use this example often, we're going to we're going to have, we need to get an ice skating rink at Lucas Oil or no, Banker's Life. And so we say, okay, fine. Now, if I were a politician and I were saying, okay, I'm gonna vote the voice of the people who voted for me. Every Black politician voted to give $350 million to build an ice skating rink, and they know it's not going to benefit the people of their community. So when you look at this, you find that most Black people will never, the people who are in office to say, I'm going to do something to change the things in your community, never do it. And the other thing is this, you see that the church is the place that people believe, they can go in the church and talk to a certain group of people, but that's changed in the Black community as well, because a lot of Black people now view the church as another source or another place that takes resources out of the Black community and doesn't put it back in. So when you look at this, you find that I think a lot of politicians are disconnected in a way that is very, very sad. But at the same time, they still get the votes because there's a certain demographic of people that do it.
Yeah, and that's a good segue to our second question. Do you think the politicians use race to divide us? I mean, I think you covered a little bit of that, but could you expand on that a little bit more? Or do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think politicians use a race to divide us. And I think the young man that was on there said it. It may not even be intentionally. But again, when I look if I were a white politician, I would be able to go in, and for the most part, unless my community was super poor, I would be able to go in and basically keep it real. I could vote my views. Most Black politicians are not voting their views. And then the other thing is this: I think that there's a tricky dynamic that happens in politics because we've been taught to believe that the Democrats have our best interests. But then we look from a historical perspective that you find that most Blacks most Black around people have Republican values. But all of a sudden, you get the story that the party's changed and all this kind of stuff. Nobody wants to talk about Dixiecrats or anything of that nature. And so there's a myth out there. But again, I do also think that there are things that are being done through the Republican Party and for the past 4 years of what we've seen that continue to keep the narrative what it is, because you had a person who said and did a lot of things that Black people that shouldn't have been said and done towards or against Black people. So I think that, I think it's a two-edged sword, because I think both parties play a role in it. And then I think that some are intentional, but then I think a lot are unintentional as well.
Yeah, I think that both parties would be definitely guilty of pandering. Tiffany, I see you nodding your head down there. You have a comment, question, or put some other insight in there for us.
Yeah, I love what you were saying about a lot of brown people having conservative values, identifying as Republican, because it certainly seems that a lot of us grow up in the church. You ask any single mom, she knows about fiscal responsibility. You pay your bills first and then you do other things. So I think certainly as a community, we do tend to be pretty conservative, but we don't always vote conservative when we get to the polls. And certainly there are pockets of the community that do believe that democratic legislation is best for people. But I think when we get to individual responsibility and understanding that a handout is not necessarily going to fix a problem, it's just, I used to be in the military, we call it putting lipstick on a pig. So, a check is a good thing, but helping me understand how I can create my own checks and create my own wealth. Those are things where our communities really benefit and we really grow. I believe in individual responsibility. I believe within our communities, when we help people on the path to home ownership, help them understand how to be entrepreneurs, create their own businesses, create their own wealth, understand how society works so that they can find niches to create businesses. That is when society flourishes, and especially our communities of color. I worked in the
Yeah.
corporate world for several years, and I was exactly what they needed me to be. And the day that I started my own business, I became so much more as a person. So I respect you being an entrepreneur and having your own business and being a consultant. When we were talking earlier about the community and fixing things, I'm interested to get your thoughts, because you talked about when brown people think that the only avenue for wealth is through the entertainment industry. That certainly works for about 1% of people, but there's a whole other 99 that have to find another way. And I really believe in individual responsibility. So my question is, we live in a red state. So in terms of legislation, leadership support, what do we need to do? What do you want to see to help advance community of color from our leaders, our state leaders? What would you like to see?
I would, I don't necessarily want to. I think that I don't know how we can do it, but I think that there has to be some finagling of corporate culture. Because when you have the ability to just hire a certain demographic and it's okay, I think that that's challenging in itself, because all of a sudden it's like you get to say certain people may not be qualified, or certain people. I mean, and you can just kind of play it, because the most difficult thing to sue for is discrimination. And so when we look and you know that that's difficult to do, then there has to be something that kind of combats that and gives people the opportunity to look inside a company and be able to tell the true story of what's happening inside of it. And if we're not there, I think that says a lot. And, I've always said, why hasn't there ever been anything to investigate the EEOC? What happens? How do you measure what's equal opportunity? If I continue to say that there's equal opportunity, the thing about that is this: if I said if equal opportunity existed, you wouldn't have to have diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so when I look at this, we're kind of continuously repackaging this thing of saying, so you had affirmative action, then you had EEOC, and then you had diversity, equity, and inclusion, and Black people are still not getting hired. You're the first, you're the last to be hired, the first to be fired. And then there's no evidence and there's no real proof of really what happened. And then the other thing is this: I think that, when you look at these corporations, I think that you have to challenge them in a way that makes them uncomfortable. I think the Civil Rights Commission has to play a role, and something has to be changed in that. Because so many cases get thrown out. And then the other thing is this: I think unemployment numbers should be real. I don't think it should be based on the people who can file to get the benefit. I think there needs to be a visible number that shows exactly who can't get the benefit of unemployment and basically that number proving that we're not working. And I think that once you start showing the real illnesses or the real ails of the Black community, you find out why murder and robberies and all these things are coming to play, because there's really this glass ceiling that people, that a certain group know about. And then it's the whole myth of racism. It's like, it's almost like you can't prove what you can't see. And so they've made it to where racism is very difficult to prove. But there's proof, because we're living in it right now.
Yeah, and I think by the interviews I did on the Peeps on the Streets, you can obviously see that it is definitely something that is still relevant. I mean, the answers were mixed, better, some worse, some the same. Lucy, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put up a question by Adam, and this is and sorry about that, Tiffany. We covered up your beautiful face with this question. Do you think the decision by many corporate entities now limit hiring exclusively to minority candidates is counterproductive or helpful? So
that's a really, really interesting question, because you have equality versus equity versus my personal views as a libertarian, which I'll share. So you have this idea of equality, that everybody has the same opportunity. And on its face, that's a really great thing to say, right? We all live in America. We're all adults. That's great. Then you have this concept of equity where you got, you got like this fence and everybody needs to see over the fence. So if you're a short person, they give you a tall box to stand on. If you're a tall person, you don't get any box to stand on. So now you've got equity, right? Because everybody can see over the fence now, but some people needed more help than others. I want to tear down the damned fence. I want to get rid of licensing laws that keep young Black women who are entrepreneurs who could do braiding. You got to have a license to do that, which is like, what is it? Something insane, like 16. I know I'm inflating this number because it's so bad, but like 16,000 hours of instruction and before you can get a license to braid hair. But if you want to be an EMT, it's like 160 hours. So there are obstacles that are put up in order to keep people from being entrepreneurs. So that's the first problem that I have, is I want to tear down the fence. The other thing that I see, and this is just my observation as a white person, is that there's an I call it the electronic plantation. Okay. My husband's Native American. Some of my kids are, brown haired, brown eyed, they're darker complected, more Mediterranean, from his heritage. And some of them are like lily white, like I am. But what I've noticed is driving while Black, as an example, is a real thing. Why is this important? Because you're being judged based on the color of your skin and you get pulled over. And then you end up creating jobs for like 15 people, the person who has to fingerprint you and the person who has to unlock the door. There is not political will to stop that behavior because it's too profitable.
Exactly.
Sorry, I got the cat in here.
Yeah, well, it almost like I gave you that question ahead of time, Lucy. That was very, very good answer. Greg, go ahead and finish that one off, because I think you were nodding your head a little bit on that, and I think that was very well put.
I agree with her 100%. I do. There's this gate. There's this thing there's so many blockers. Even things like, as I was working for IMPD, I had a run-in with the law, and they were so wrong because they created law right in front of my face, although I worked for them. And it was crazy. They made it to where it was going to be an illegal tow. They just created all these charges. But if it had not been me, and a person who has access and a person who could call the chief of police, it would have ruined someone's life. And so when I look at this and I see that there are people who eat off the demise of Black people. So therefore, when you find out that there's so many jobs created just because, or there's jobs created because, these people are treated a certain way, I think that those are key things that legislators should be looking at. And not only legislators, but even, from a local perspective, because the thing that the bad taste that was left in my mouth about that from IMPD is the fact that they didn't want me to deal with the lieutenant who did wrong. They did nothing. And that is just such a sick thing when you think about it. And for me to be a person who was on the inside to deal with that, I know for a fact that there are probably tons of people whose lives have simply been ruined over something as simple as a traffic ticket or a legal park and getting their car towed or impounded and not being able to pay the fees to get it out.
The drug war is racist. So all drugs should be made completely legal. We should decriminalize them. People should be allowed to put in their body what they want. And then that would take away the targeting of small-time entrepreneurs who may be selling. There's no reason that any nonviolent person should be in jail for drugs. Why does the government have the so-called right, or they've said that they have the right to determine what my state of being is, whether I'm happy or sad? Anyway, sorry, Tiffany.
Oh, no, just a quick question. I loved what you were saying, and it just went out. She lost me. I got lost for just a second. I'm so sorry. Please keep going. Keep going. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. Greg, one of the things that hopefully folks will look back at episode 34 of Do Something Indie. I put the link in the comments there, but I had heard this before, but you talked about crabs in the pot or in the barrel. Talk about that, because I do notice that sometimes when Black people get ahead in life, they don't look back. They don't go back to that same neighborhood and type of thing. So explain that to our viewers and to me again, because I really thought that was a very good comment that I really just didn't think about how you mentioned it.
I think one of the greatest forms of racism is classism. I think that, Black people have gotten to a point where they look and they're like, I'm not them. And then it's this thing of not having this desire to help certain people and to look at certain people a certain way because they've not achieved the same things that you've achieved. But the bad thing about it is, I'm working on a book right now. We'll talk about that one day. But I have a chapter that's called The Loneliest Person in the Room. And when you think about the Oprah Winfrey's and the Jay-Z's, the Michael Jordans, they're still the minority in that room. When it's all said and done, they're still not in rooms filled with Black people, and there's a reason for it. I think that there's a fear of being involved in your community when you realize where your bread is buttered. And so therefore it's very difficult for them to operate in said freedom because they believe it could be, they know it can be taken away. I think that it's a thing of really trying to maneuver it and do certain things that do not cause fear. When we look at just if anyone watched Judas and the Black Messiah, the FBI having this thing of saying there should be no Black Messiah, then heck, you're not gonna take the risk of dying to help people per se. Now, a lot of people don't take that position. I say a lot of things that disturb a lot of people because I'm like King. I have another chapter called "The Leader Dies Alone." King died alone. Fred Hampton died alone. Malcolm X died alone. Medgar Evers died alone. And then you look at the people who were with King, the dream, nothing that he was working on got fulfilled. Everyone turned and joined the group that killed their leader. So when you look at this, you realize that to reach back is a dangerous thing. And because once you make the decision of reaching to help, you become something different. And then I think the other thing is, when you create a system of jealous, or when you create a system, and it's not a system of jealousy and envy, it's a system of punishment. I wrote an article some time ago in the Indianapolis Recorder. I don't even know if it made the Recorder, but I wrote an article on my LinkedIn page, and it said, "Where have the roads taken?" And that the rodent field is what developed competition in the Black community. Because the person who picked the least got the lashes. So therefore, you don't have a system of saying, I help you, I compete with you. Because that pretty much is one of the, byproducts of what slavery did to Black people, is that the weakest link was the person that you didn't help. You beat them. And I think that still carries on today.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept. So I see Tiffany has gathered her thoughts here. Go ahead.
So, Greg, I love it. Disagree with you just a little bit. So, in terms of reaching back, I've heard it said before that a parent is only as happy as their most unhappy child. And I think reaching back into the community is very, very important. And you do take a big risk, but I'm a solutionist. When there's problems, there's solutions, and a lot of things are systemic. And if you can figure out what the true problem is, you can fix things. And I think that when we become educated and successful and we turn our backs on our communities of color, we fail. I'm no different than anybody else. And so this is what I love. So a couple years ago, my daughter went to London. She was an All-American cheerleader. We're leaving Paris. We're taking the train back to London, and there were two lines. One line was for EU citizens, and the other line was for everybody else. Blue, green, purple, American, Saudi, Africans, everybody else. So I think that that's one of the things that we have to get down to. It's like we're Americans, and it doesn't matter, and we have to help each other, especially successful brown people. We have to reach back into the communities and help where we can. And when I think about crabs in a barrel, crabs in a pot, I used to live and work in Baltimore, Maryland. And if you've ever had crabs, you know what happens when you put them in a pot. The water is hot. They're screaming because it's steaming. And if one of them gets high, they pull the other one down because nobody wants to die in the hot boiling water and to be dinner. And that crab in a pot mentality is something. It's there, and you're very, very true. It's true, and it happens. It happens in all communities. But for us who are successful, we have to continue to reach back. So going back just a little bit more, you were talking about what happened with you with the law enforcement and how you wanted to fight it. And there's two things in my mind that stick out. When we know that systems are against us and that they don't work for us, when we can figure out how to make those systems work for us and how to work around them, we go from playing checkers to playing chess. That's where we have to be as a community. We have to play chess. We know that we have to be twice as good to get the promotion. We know we've got to work extra hours. If it says a high school diploma, you have to have an associate's. If you need 10 hours of community engagement, you got to have 50. If it's 1,000 signatures, you got to have 2,500. So we know that when the game is played, we can't play checkers. We have to play chess. And to me, that's how we move our communities forward, is when we say, look, it's not fair. Things aren't going to work out the way you want. Let's talk about how you can be the best you so that you can get as far as you can get in this society, and we can reach back and help others. You know, my dad was a 30-year veteran. My dad's retired Army. He did 30 years in the Army. His brothers were in the Army. My first relative in the United States to be counted was counted when he enlisted in the United States Army during the Civil War. I was the first officer in my family. We all have to pick up the ball and move it forward. We got to go from checkers to chess.
So
All right.
Can I expound on that?
Oh yeah, I was just getting ready to get you just because I can see your wheels turning.
So James Baldwin made it very clear that we live in America, but we have never been Americans. There's nothing in the documentation that says we were Americans. Nothing. And there's still nothing in the documentation that classifies us as Americans. That's why we've been deemed African American. The other thing is this. As a competitor, as a person who likes to compete, I've played chess a long time, and I don't think it's the game for Black people. And the reason I don't think it's the game for Black people is because as a pawn, if you cross the board, you can never be made a king. And the only game you can do that in is checkers. So my advice to Black people is to play checkers, because you can eventually get a crown, and then you can move freely. It's like you will always be a pawn, and the only thing that elevates, and I think that there's another part of Willie Lynch that says the only person that can get freedom or who can be in a position of operating with some autonomy is a Black woman. And that's chess, because you can become a queen, but you can never become a king. And so when we look at this, we have to understand, one, James Baldwin said it best. You don't have to tell me that you hate me verbally, because every statistic in America shows that you hate me. So when I look at that, and if I classify myself, if I continue to operate, I mean, let's say this, let me catch my thought. Frederick Douglass said it on July the 4th in the speech. What does the 4th of July mean to the slave? He did not speak as an American because he said I was not included. So I think the bigger challenges that we face is when people say, you know, I can say it all day. But when I look at a group of people who are treated so un-American by law enforcement, by corporate America, I mean, in so many different ways, then I'm like, am I really American, or am I a product that America brought here to make this America?
So good points. I love it. But it is 2021. Brown people, stand up. Stand up. We're Americans. You have the opportunities to get education. There's the internet. Oh my God.
What's the return on investment?
I was the biggest nerd in high school. Do you know how big of a nerd I would have been with the internet? Oh my goodness. So I feel like if a brown person cannot make it in the United States of America, they can't make it anywhere. If you can't make it in America.
Black people are 1% of all tech. 1% of all tech. 1%
tech the only way?
Of all
tech the only way?
So it's amazing that someone can literally sit here and say that all these statistics, we can look at all these statistics that prove that there's an issue, but what happens is the ones who get a couple of dollars or make something happen believe that those opportunities exist for everyone. No, those opportunities truly exist for the people who will say that anyone can make it, and then they become the advocates of the enemy, and then they block their own people because they don't fight the good fight.
This is the good fight. I believe in my heart that things are not equal. I grew up in a two-parent household. Everybody doesn't have that. I'm divorced. My daughter doesn't have two parents here. So she learns from me, and she spent every other summer with her dad. But my point is that there comes a time where individual responsibility has to come into play. If the world's looking like a bag of crap, you got to say, look, I'm either going to play with this or I'm going to make my life better. Individual responsibility, choice, opportunity is something that communities of color, that brown people have to understand. It exists. We cannot allow
everyone who stood up.
We cannot allow people to think
every
that
black leader that stood up
it.
for their rights was killed.
I'm sorry.
Does that not
wait a minute. You're right. You're right.
I would like to chime in.
Civil rights movement all the time, but it's 2021. Yeah. What are we doing with the rights that we have? How many kids are graduating from high school, seeking tuition assistance, getting college loans, getting apprenticeships? We have there's a brand new law that's going to help kids from communities of color, kids who receive TANF, to get apprenticeship, work skill development. It's not going to count against their household incomes. We're doing what we can to help people move forward. And I think any conversation that is not productive around helping people move forward, we're moving backwards. Why would we want to help people move backwards?
So I'm just going to chime in and
prove that. Go ahead.
I'm going to chime in here and say, I brought up the fact that before that I was the Catholic school kid. I grew up going to Catholic school from K through college. I went to the most prestigious Catholic school in my county. I was in sports. I never joined a gang. You know what? The moment I stepped off that campus, I was pulled over 2 to 3 times a week. It was a grind on me. And so when I say you can say that you can succeed if you keep trying, but I also tell people you also need to understand the grind that comes with being a young man, knowing I am busting my ass to do everything that I can, and I am still, in your eyes, inferior. And so I do see that issue. And to me, I say, we have to address that part of it. You can't say, well, just keep grinding harder and harder. There's a certain point at it where you're like, why in the hell am I even trying?
Exactly.
And just to kind of go on to that, to my next, or what I was going to bring up in my next question, it kind of ties in. I mean, and I've said it before, I work in a lot of Section 8 housing on the west side of South Bend, through parts of Mishawaka. We are in areas where banks are scarce. If I go into a Walmart, if I go into a Meijer on the west side of South Bend, I guarantee you it doesn't look the same as it does in Mishawaka. They don't put the same amount of money in it. The company's not putting that in. The banks aren't there. There is a lot of stuff missing. There's a lot of infrastructure that's there. You could say, hey, home ownership should be a thing. But when a lot of these are substandard housing and most of them are being held on, there's people who have 1,200 houses, 2,000 houses on South Bend, and they're barely meeting minimum standards. When Greg says, I've been in these houses, when Greg says, hey, we wake up every day, I don't know why you would want to get out of bed. I've been in those houses. I've seen it. And to me, you cannot keep telling people you have to keep striving and then but have them live in a world where you don't see a way out. You just don't, you don't see that.
I'm laughing because someone says unite. Sorry.
No, it's okay. I was going to say, Ed, I could see Ed getting ready to talk on that. And, it is, we look at things through our own lenses, and sometimes we don't look outside of our own lens. And, this has been a very good conversation because this is the kind of conversations we need to have. And I think a lot of people are afraid to talk to Black people because maybe they'll say the wrong thing. And I know Tiffany was trying to educate me a little bit before the show about, the little nuances in that. And, sometimes we got to be a little brave to stick our neck out, so to speak, and say what's on our mind, because that's what, our show, the premise is, hey, we respect your opinion. We want to hear it and we want to try to understand it. And, these conversations, we've already talked an hour pretty much about this, and it just seems like we're just getting started. But, that's why we may have to have you on again, Greg, when maybe you might have a political announcement or something you might want to make, unless you want to make that tonight. I don't know. It's coming up. But so it is getting close to time for our – Yeah. We're going to talk about that off the air. Okay. So, but we're going to do the conspiracy theory now. And I read, you can stay on if you have your own conspiracy theory. You could make it up. Mine is it's not made up, but it's totally interesting. It's totally something that happened many, many, many years ago. So we have tinfoil hats and all that. But I don't know. Let's see, Lucy, I think I can see you having one more question. Let's let Lucy wrap it up tonight for us. Then we're going to go to the conspiracy theory segment of the show.
Yeah, absolutely. As somebody that grew up, lower middle class and white, dad was a union worker, mom was a stay-at-home mom. I grew up in Eagledale in a little 800 square foot house. I have struggled to overcome that poverty mindset that was beset upon me because of my socioeconomic level. And the thing that I really want to help people do is to understand that you can be lifted up. And the conversations that we have with our children surrounding money need to change. And so if anybody hasn't read this book, I definitely recommend you go get Robert Kiyosaki's book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, What the Rich Teach Their Kids About Money, that the poor and middle class do not. Because the conversations that rich people have about investing in their future, about making money work for them, about home ownership, I won't even get into exactly why the government keeps poor people from owning houses. But I really want to give some sort of hope, and go get that Rich Dad, Poor Dad book. It's very, very good. And it's made me change my language around money with my own kids.
Very good. Now, Greg, I'm going to let you have the last word here. And we appreciate you coming on with us. And we already have our audience members want another show later on. So, hey, you may end up being a guest host or just another guest. And you got Ed fired up tonight and Tiffany fired up. So you did your job. Lucy was calm and cool and collected, just like she always is. But with 10 kids, you got to have that big gasket. You can't let it go.
Say something about what Ed said about banks?
Sure.
I agree. And one thing we have to understand why brick and mortar banks are not in Black communities. Because when you think about 2018, 8 out of every $10 went to the top 1%. And when you think about the other part is the dollar lasts in the Black community 6 hours. So by the time if you get paid on a Friday and you work the 8-hour shift and 6 hours of you getting paid, your dollar is already gone to another community. So why would you build banks? Banks are built to do banking business. Our community withdraws. So therefore, what do? You take out the relationship part of banking, and you put in ATMs, because we are consumers at this point. We are people whose money goes out of our community so fast that there's no need to have a relationship with you as it relates to banking. So therefore, our dollar is taken, and you go and you withdraw, and you give the money right back to a community that is not yours, and that is done through ATMs.
Hey, I would agree with you, but I would also, from the real estate side, say that there are federal guidelines that require banks to do so much investment within a radius of their bank. And so that also plays a large role into why they stay out of certain communities.
Yeah, I'm telling you, we've touched just on the tip of this iceberg of all the little nuances that add up to what is basically oppression. I mean, you can call it what you want. That might be a stern word, but it's stuff that a person who looks like me, a 60-year-old white dude, does not have to deal with. I'm sorry. I don't have to deal with that. And, but trying to understand and listen is something that I feel is very important. Well, I tell you what, this has been a great show so far. Oh, Tiffany, you got something more here?
I would say that one of the things that Greg said in the beginning about one of the things that we have to do is we need to listen. We need to listen to people. And John, if you think that this is not something that you would ever have to deal with, when people are marginalized, disenfranchised, and they feel hopeless, those are the kind of people who commit crime. They will do petty crimes. They'll hit an old lady in the head at the mall. They'll steal a purse. The reason why we have to work as a community to advance all people is so that people don't live with hopelessness. Hopeless people are dangerous. They're dangerous to our communities, and that's the reason right there. People who are hopeless, they shoot indiscriminately, they steal, they do things, and that's the reason why we have to care and we have to do more.
Yeah, let me clarify that. I personally don't have to deal with that stuff, but I know that it's in our society, and that type of thing is like, I don't think deal is the right word for that, but to try to understand that. But as far as me understanding that is where the tricky part comes in. It's like I've not had to experience the same experiences that I hear about these things. And it's just very fascinating to me. So. All right.
There's a return on investment on hopelessness, and that's called prison.
Yeah. Oh man, that's pretty profound. All right. Well, it's a very good discussion tonight, and I think this is a very good show. I think that we need to do it again in the future, and I liked it. So we're going to go ahead, and I'm going to play that now. Greg, don't laugh too much at this, because usually I play this little intro to the people before the show, so they don't get taken off guard by my bad dental hygiene and whatnot. So this is where we get our tinfoil hats on, and we have a conspiracy theory moments. So here you go. Hey y'all, it's time for the conspiracy theory. So you better get your tinfoil hat out, and let's see what's going on this week. So okay, let's go back to our regularly formed. Let's see. I go here. Lucy goes there. Greg goes there. Ed goes there. There we go. Is everybody all dizzy now from that? So we have it. So let's see. Hey, Ed, you really worked hard on your tinfoil. What, did your dog eat it?
This is my daughter trying to make a bow.
Oh, okay. It's beautiful. I mean, everybody gets a trophy for that art.
Tiffany made her want to do something special.
Oh, I know. Look at that. It's like, it seems like it grows every week. And then Lucy looks like she's in the trenches of Britain when we were fighting the World War II. But of course, mine sort of does too. It is actually my wife's colander. So Ed, since you've worked so hard on your tinfoil hat, what do you have for us tonight?
For Pride Month, I'm going to go kind of Lucy route and go with conspiracy fact. Being a big supporter of the LGBTQ community, My wife has spent many years working with adolescent sex offenders. One of the biggest things that drives me crazy is hearing all this talk about transgender people coming after children and molesting children. And the truth of the matter is, a lot of the people who turn out to be child molesters were actually molested themselves, and you're far more likely to be molested by a family member or somebody that you know within your inner circle. And so I'm terrible at conspiracy theories and all of this, but I at least wanted to put out the real message that I think it's time to get past blaming the transgender community for everything and really face up to the real facts. So,
yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know, but Tiffany's, friend in the backyard, I don't know, is the Bigfoot a transgender, or what's the gender of the Bigfoot? I mean, is it male? So Tiffany, go ahead and give us your and I'm hoping this is a continuation of the last of your previous one. So go ahead.
So, Greg, I don't do conspiracy theories. All I can tell you is that my boyfriend and I had a great weekend. We went home to North Carolina, spent some time with my dad. He turned 80 this weekend. We celebrated Father's Day and Juneteenth. And it was a wonderful weekend. Just me, my boyfriend. He's super sweet. He doesn't talk much, but we have our own language. So yay. No conspiracies here.
Yeah. So I don't know, Lucy, if you could beat either one of those, but go ahead.
I hope so. Oh, well, my conspiracy theory is that there's a secret race of libertarian space aliens who have created crypto and given us the gift of blockchain in order to bring down world governments and liberate people all over the world. And secret messages are encoded in Aldous Huxley's Brave New World and George Orwell's 1984, as well as Animal Farm, to lead us to the promised land.
All right, Mr. Meriweather, do you have a conspiracy theory? As you can see, the bar is not
this has been
wide.
excellent. I don't have anything, but that's some good stuff. I promise if I'm ever back again, I'll be able to do one. I got you.
All right. Well, hey, here's my conspiracy theory, and this just tells you how far conspiracy theories could go back. So this is around 1972. I'm in sixth grade. And I grew up on the south side of Indy, out in the little suburbs there. We don't have any black folks we have no black people at our school, none. So our school cafeteria came out with this ketchup packets that the ketchup was actually green instead of red. Well, one of my wonderful classmates decided to make up this theory that, black people, that's what color their blood is. They don't have red blood like everybody else. Well, us being sixth graders, we were scared to ask anybody, and we didn't have any black friends. So that rumor went on for quite a while until we actually got to high school, when we had some exchange students that were black, and they told us that that's not correct. So that's a long-going personal conspiracy theory that has been since debunked. And now I feel a little embarrassed that in the sixth grade that I was that silly, but I was only 12. So give me a break. So there you go. That's how the conspiracy theory works. And it's just another great show, everybody. And I'm always amazed at how quickly an hour goes, and everybody wave at Tiffany's Bigfoot boyfriend. Maybe he'll get a hairstyle done for next week, or whatever.
I call him Little Hands.
I think it's getting way past our hour now. So I do appreciate everybody for taking their time. All the viewers, we love the questions. Share it. Tell all your friends. We definitely have a growing audience, and I think we're covering some topics that are, we try to keep it light, but yet we want to be, serious about some things. So I appreciate everybody tonight, and thanks for tuning in.